Hey everyone, Tsunami Red here. This video is about this guitar here, the Legator Opus O6FP. I'll be covering all sorts of things about this guitar, but most notably, its multi-scale fan fret neck. There's lots that I have to say, but since most of you just want to hear what the guitar sounds like, we'll start with that. Okay, talk time. So as I highlighted in my previous video, multiscale or fan frets have become a thing in the guitar world. Since discovering this, I've been really wanting to try a 6-stringer to see if multiscale is for me. But the vast majority of multiscale guitars on the market right now are 7 and 8 stringers and very, very few 6-stringers. And the few 6-stringers that are out there are super expensive. I have tried a few 7-string multiscale axes, but I think most guitarists would agree. A 7-string guitar feels very different from a 6, and I'm just not a 7-string guy. So that only made me want to try a 6-stringer even more. What can I say? We're musicians. We all suffer from gear lust. So after doing a ton of research on Instagram and Google, this Legator Opus seemed like a good option. It fit the bill, being a 6-string multiscale. The guitar is along the lines of what I like in a guitar, and most importantly, it was a lot cheaper than most other 6-string multiscale guitars out there. So that's the backstory. I've been playing this for quite some time now, enough so that I can share some of my insights on it. Let's start from the very beginning, even before I got the guitar. During my research, I came across a number of reviews on YouTube and guitar forums about Legator, and quite a number of them were actually negative reviews, mostly about how their guitars had a lot of rough spots, their guitars looked like they'd been put together in a hurry, generally a lot of things that should have been caught during the QA stage. That said, many of those negative reviews were written around 2012, 2013, early mid-2010s. The more recent reviews, like around 2017, 2018, seemed to be more favorable, but even still, seeing the number of negative reviews made me skeptical about giving them a try, but I still went ahead and decided to give them a chance. I ordered the guitar directly from their site, and it arrived about a month later. Here's me unboxing the guitar. Okay, here's how the guitar came to me. It's in this nice box. They put a lot of fragile stickers here, that's a good thing, to make sure it doesn't get damaged during transport. So, okay, I'm gonna open it up and see what's inside. So inside that box was another box. It's actually the box of the guitar itself. So here's what I'm gonna open next. So inside the box, besides the guitar, was also a set of hex keys, and there was a lot of padding, styrofoam, and a big bag to protect the guitar during transport. Good stuff. So, like anyone would be after immediately unboxing something, I was all excited about this axe and getting down to business with it, but I decided to examine it really carefully at first. I'd say this was QA'd pretty well, but there were some things I noticed. On the underside of the neck, near the joint, there's a pretty noticeable scratch. It's been sanded down pretty well, and I don't feel it at all when playing, but still. On the top side of the neck, near the joint, there's a big leftover pencil mark and a tiny crack that looks like a bullet went through glass. Again, doesn't impact my playing at all, but these are little things you don't want to see. The body doesn't have a gloss finish, so it's easy to feel the rough spots in the wood that haven't been sanded down perfectly. There are tiny little spots here and there where you can feel little bumps that should have been sanded down more. Here, here, here on the back, and here on the front. But the most obvious bit that they missed, or didn't bother to refine, was the truss rod hole here, where you can clearly see some leftover wood bits sticking out. And again, this won't affect the guitar's playability or tone at all, but these little things do make an impression. But overall, this guitar came as brand new as could be, ready to play out of the box, and I'd say there's nothing defective about it. If Legator's past reviews were as bad as people say, then I would think they've come a long way in addressing these issues. So let's talk about the guitar itself. It isn't listed on Legator's website anymore, so I'll outline some specs. The scale length is 25.5 on the top string and 27 on the bottom string, which is a common multiscale for 6-string multiscales. It has a swamp ash body, maple neck, and ebony fretboard, and these woods are associated with bright tones for the most part. The fretboard radius is 14 inches. It's pretty flat. You have monorails, which are basically individual bridge pieces. The tuners are Legator's own locking tuners. More on this in a sec. The pickups are, well, Legator says they're Alnico V passive high output pickups, 2 humbuckers. Again, more on this in a sec. The control scheme is straightforward. Volume, tone, 3-way switch. When ordering from their site, there were options to upgrade certain parts of the guitar. The tuners, the pickups, and adding a gig bag. By default, the tuners on the guitar were Grovers, which are good, but I personally believe locking tuners are always a worthwhile upgrade. The default pickups are Legator's own passive pickups, but there was the option to upgrade to Fishman Fluence pickups, which are active. I decided to pass on this upgrade as I personally prefer passive pickups. Not to mention, it was a pretty pricey upgrade. For the gig bag option, I passed on that as well. I already have a rugged gig bag that can fit most of my guitars, and I also have an empty guitar case that I originally intended to use for this guitar, but more on that later. As for the price, I bought this guitar at a pretty good time. They had a promo during Black Friday in addition to a year-end sale. The year-end sale price for the guitar was $420 US, plus $60 for the locking tuners upgrade, 15% off for Black Friday, plus $100 for shipping. After the US to Canadian conversion, plus customs, I ended up paying just over $700 Canadian. There's a lot that I like about this guitar. Starting with the overall design, it's a Telecaster body with a metal guitar neck. I'm a Telecaster fan and I really like the take on this. Unlike a traditional Telecaster, they've added a number of cutaways. The tummy cut here, and the forearm cut here, so it's more comfortable to hold against your body. There's also a slight cutaway here, but best of all, the bolt-on joint in the back here has been shaved down, so it's much easier to play high notes on the neck. The guitar itself is solidly built, like a Telecaster. It's got some weight to it. It's not light, but it's damn solid, and overall, I like this balance between a classic look and design with a modern feel and aesthetics. Even though I didn't upgrade the pickups, these stock passives have a decent output. When going through my audio interface, I don't need to turn the input very high to get a decent level. The neck pickup, nice and warm, and through a good amp, you can still get some nice, woody sounding clean tones. The bridge can be a little bright, but overall, it's got a tight response, just what you want in a bridge humbucker for heavy riffs and solos. The middle setting sounds pretty punchy. You get a tight low end and still have some chime in the high end. Either way, I'm good with these pickups. I can get some good sounds out of them. But my favorite thing about this guitar is the neck. I kid you not. This is one of the best necks I've ever played, and that's not even taking into account these fan frets. It's so sleek, so fast, so comfortable in my hand. My fingers just feel like they can fly. The neck profile is super thin and flat as any metal guitar, like an Ibanez or Jackson. The neck width does feel a little more narrow though. The strings are a little closer to each other compared to, say, a traditional Fender guitar, but it is fairly consistent. It's not one of those where it's much thinner here and then gets way wider here. Combine that with the 14-inch radius, which is really flat, it makes it really easy to play. You've all heard of Fender's new line of American Ultras, and I actually tried a Tele in store a few months ago, and I can honestly say, this neck feels really, really close to it. It's super playable. I'll be honest, there's not that much I dislike with this guitar, even with the few minor things they missed during QA. The only modification I made was to the string trees. Initially, I found the tuning not very smooth, particularly on these two higher strings, the B and the E. I'd be turning the tuners and not hearing any difference, then all of a sudden the tuning would be way sharper or flatter than what it just was. At first I thought it was due to kinks in the string trees, and it's not uncommon with these types. Luckily I had 2 roller string trees lying around and I replaced them. Tuning is a little more smoother and the guitar's tuning is a little more stable, but I'm still getting the same issue on the B string, where there's this one pitch spot where tuning past it will drastically make the string go much flatter or sharper. Now I'm guessing this could be something to do with how the nut was filed, and that's something I would attribute to being missed during the QA stage. Another very minor gripe I have, I set aside a case for this guitar, but it doesn't fit. It's a nice fender case specifically made for Strats and Tellies, and while it fits the body portion perfectly, the neck is just a little too long, so it can't close. It makes sense though, it's multi-scale, so the neck is going to be longer than a traditional Telly. The one big thing I would have liked to see on this guitar would be an option to split the coils. I'm more of a single coil than humbucker guy, so having access to single coil like tones would have been fantastic. But then again, I kinda understand where Legator is coming from. Their target audience is the metal crowd, and when in metal would you ever use single coils? And lastly, it would have been nice if they had other colored finishes, like a red finish, because I'm a sucker for red guitars. But that's just wishful thinking on my part. This is a non-issue, really. So let's talk about Multiscale now. As I highlighted in my previous video, other multi-scale brands don't necessarily use the halfway point of the neck as the center of the fan. To recap, depending on where the straight fret is on the neck, the fanning may or may not be symmetrical. I specifically wanted to try one that is symmetrical, and typically that would mean the straight fret is at the 8th or the 9th fret. On this Legator guitar, it's on the 8th fret, so the fanning is almost symmetrical, or close enough. If you're new to this whole multi-scale fan fret thing, you're probably wondering, does it feel different? Do I need to adjust my playing? Well, like before, when I first started playing it, it didn't feel too different, but as I put more time into it and tried different things, there were things that I started to notice. When playing in the middle of the neck, that's to say, when playing in the area where the neighboring frets are relatively straight, you won't feel much difference, whether it's playing bar chords or playing box scales, but on extreme ends where the frets are really diagonal, that's where you notice the difference. On the lower end, like the first fret, I still have trouble doing an F bar chord. I think guitarists get used to scrunching up their hand to play on a standard scale, so when I do it on this, I can't quite get all the strings to ring cleanly. Might be different for others, but this is how I'm experiencing it, probably due to muscle memory. Even if I try to adjust, either by my fingers, my hand, or wrist positioning, I still can't find a comfortable way to play this. There is the lazy way of playing bar chords involving all 6 strings, like this. And the fan frets actually do help a little, since your fingers can be a little flatter, and you're basically fingering the strings in a more sloppy sort of manner. It does help if you point the guitar up, like this. More on this later. You've already heard me praise this neck, and there's more than I can say about it. Because the scale length for the lower strings are longer than usual, naturally, the overall neck is going to be longer than a standard guitar's. And at 27 inches, it's close to the same length as a baritone guitar. So as a result, this longer neck means there's way more open space to play high notes past the 12th fret. If you compare this to, say, a typical Fender guitar playing the same notes around the 12th fret, it's a little more challenging as the back of your hand is probably touching the joint where the neck and the body meet. On this guitar, you have a lot more free space before you get to that point. That said, there is one thing where these fan frets did work against me, but this could be just me. When playing higher up on the neck, your wrist and fingers will rotate like this. So in theory, the fan frets should make things more efficient since the frets are lined up in the same direction as your wrist and fingers. But for me, it wasn't, and still isn't, a seamless playing experience, as I still have to shift my fingers a little bit to the sides when going from string to string. I don't have to worry about this when playing straight frets, although it could be just me being used to playing them from my own muscle memory. Also, if I'm pressing down on multiple strings or barring the full fret, I have to remember to angle my index finger a bit more to properly press all the strings on the same fret. I don't have to think about this as much on straight frets. You've probably heard that one of the biggest benefits of multiscale is that the longer scale length for the bottom strings allows for more even string tension. That is, each of the strings have a similar tension. So in theory, the lower strings on a multiscale should have higher tension than the lower strings on a regular scale. Well, when it comes to me playing this guitar, I'm finding these higher strings have a fairly high tension and I need to apply more pressure when bending. Not sure why that is, but that's what my playing experience has been. It's not unbendable, but it is a little more challenging for me as I don't have the strongest fingers. A few other things to note. In my previous video, I mentioned that sliding down the fretboard was something I had to pay attention to, since the distance between frets are different on each string, but it's not as noticeable on this, probably because the neck isn't as long as the bass. One thing that is easier to do is playing double stops. Since the frets are wider for the lower strings, you get a little more space to play, a little more forgiveness, so to speak. And finally, just in case some of you were wondering when it comes to guitar accessories, can you use a capo? Yes, you can. It just needs to go on diagonally and make sure all the strings ring properly. And can you use a slide? Well, I'll admit I'm not very good with a slide to begin with, but it seems to work as expected. Referencing my previous Dingwall video, long story short, my theory was that fan frets are most beneficial if you position your thumb behind the neck. Most guitarists usually play with their thumbs sticking out, above the neck, and wrap it around like this. I previously said it works out better if you play with your thumb behind your neck. So when it comes to playing guitar, that means if you're sitting down, playing it classical guitar style, like this. If you're standing up, it means tightening up your strap and playing the guitar higher up. That was my theory when it came to playing multiscale bass. Does it hold up when it comes to playing this guitar? Kind of. No matter how high or low I hold the guitar when standing, when it comes to playing the lower frets, I find that my wrist and fingers will naturally position themselves more in line with the diagonal frets. It's most evident when I do an F bar chord. It still feels a little unnatural to me, maybe because I'm actually straightening my index finger all the way. But either way, the frets are, in theory at least, better positioned. Also, I find myself usually needing to point the guitar higher up, like this, to position my left hand to play these lower frets, no matter how high or low I'm holding the guitar. The higher frets are a different story. Because my wrist and fingers need to rotate in the opposite direction, holding the guitar high and pointing it up actually works against me when trying to play higher up on the fingerboard. The best way to accommodate this is to do the opposite. I need to lower the guitar and bring it down. And if I really want to have my fingers better positioned above the frets, that means pointing the guitar down, like really down. But say I'm playing some high notes and then I want to go back to playing some low notes soon after. Now what? So the only way that I can think of to accommodate both of these instances is to point the guitar up or down depending on where I'm playing on the neck. Look at this jackass here. Sure looks cool playing like that. Going up and down, back and forth. Real efficient. Doesn't look like a hassle at all. Yeah. But again, this is just my experience. I'm positive there are many players out there who don't have this issue. These are just my observations. Now, some of you may be thinking, dude, you're just playing the way you're used to. You're playing the way you would normally play a standard scale on a multi-scale guitar. Of course it's going to feel different. You should be adjusting your playing based on what this guitar is. Two things. Number one, no, I shouldn't have to adjust. If I'm going to try something that's meant to be beneficial for the majority of users, it should just work as is. If a product requires an adjustment from the end user, then it's no longer an improved product for the mainstream market. Rather, it's a specialized product for a particular user. From my understanding, that's not what multiscale and fan frets are all about. It's supposedly meant to be for all guitarists. And number two, how do I adjust? Where are the instructions? Do you know of any guides or recommended best practices? The most intuitive adjustment I've tried to make is being more conscious of rotating my wrist based on what frets I'm playing, but that can only help so much, and even then, after playing for a while, I might fall back into my old habits again. Again, if a significant adjustment is needed, it isn't fair to expect that adjustment to be done easily and quickly. Just think of all the things you do habitually every day. Even the slightest adjustment takes time and effort, right? And I'm pretty certain no one starts learning guitar for the first time on a multi-scale. Okay, so I've been playing this guitar for quite some time, but on occasion I still go back to other guitars that are more traditional, non-multi-scale. I have a tendency to spend a lot of time practicing on one guitar and then playing another, so that allows me to really feel the differences between each guitar. For a close comparison, I'm judging the differences between this fan fretter against this, a Fender Player Series Telecaster. It's the benchmark Telecaster which all Telecasters are measured against. So, how did it feel going back to a regular fixed scale guitar? Well, overall, it can be summed up by simply saying, it was like returning home for me. Didn't think twice about anything when it came to how I played. I could incorporate my thumb again for chord work and doing a lazy man's bar chord. Didn't have to adjust my wrist or fingers at the ends of the fretboard. The string tension wasn't even though, but bending higher strings was easier since there's less tension. But again, that could be just me. Slides, no issues. Chord work like bar chords, pressing multiple strings on the same fret, all good. But again, it could be because I'm playing what I've always been used to. Playing standing up, perfectly fine playing the guitar as is. Don't feel the need to raise the guitar or point it down. That's not to say that it was all smooth sailing though. Doing double stops isn't as forgiving as there's less space on the lower frets, and higher notes past the 12th fret are closer to the neck and body joint. But overall, everything just felt more comfortable for me. Whether it's because I could once again play the way I've always been used to, or whether fan frets just aren't for me, I can't really say for certain. Alright, so it's time to finally draw some conclusions. What do I think of this guitar overall? I like it. It's solid, it's very playable, sounds decent, and it's been a great experience playing 6-string multi-scale and getting a better understanding of multiscale as a whole. What do I think of the multiscale? It's an interesting concept. I'm not sure if it's for everyone, but it's great to see innovations to something that has been taken for granted for so many decades. It might work out for some players, particularly the type who plays a lot of metal riffs instead of traditional chords, but again, personally, I don't see this being a thing for everyone. Is 6-string multi-scale for me? I'm going to say no. The extreme ends of the fretboard require a bit too much of an adjustment for me. I might consider a less drastic fan, like a 25.5 to 24.75, but that's not a common multi-scale, and as far as I know, only one company offers this. But I don't have tons of money lying around to have a custom guitar built just to see if I may or may not like something. Do I feel like I got my money's worth? Hell yes. Using this benchmark Players Series Telecaster, right now, where I live, these go for just under 1,000 Canadian. Even after shipping, customs, and the exchange rate, I feel like I've gotten a guitar that's worth just as much as a standard Tele. And finally, the two biggest questions that you probably have. Is multi-scale guitar for you? Well, like I said in my previous Dingwall video, you gotta try for yourself. But I hope that whatever observations I've made can serve as insight to you. And lastly, would I recommend this guitar? Hell yes. It's a great guitar for the money and very affordable if you're looking to try a 6-string multi-scale. Unfortunately, it's no longer listed on Legator's website, so likely the only way to acquire this guitar is on the secondhand market. Maybe keep an eye out on reverb.com, eBay, and other such sites. And that pretty much wraps it up for me. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you stuck around for the entire video. Comments and questions are certainly welcome. Really appreciate it if you could give this video a thumbs up, and by all means, please feel free to subscribe. This is Tsunami Red, signing off.